meditation, practicing the Dharma, helps you cultivate this aesthetic appreciation, this sense of beauty. It doesn't have to be limited to those people that call themselves artists. So I've been asked to talk about integration, which sounds like a technical kind of word, doesn't it? And rather sort of dull, I think. So I'll try and explain what Bhante Sangharakshita means by integration and why it's so important in our Dharma lives. When I was thinking about the talk, I was just sort of remembering that, well, when I first came to learn meditation, if somebody had said I would get to know myself better, and that's why meditation was so important, I would have sort of said, look, I'm not that interested. I think I know myself enough. I didn't know myself very well at all. I was about 28 or 29, and but that wasn't why I was interested in meditation. Knowing myself felt sort of like, I could go to therapy or something to if I wanted to find out more about me, but I wasn't that interested. I was interested in enlightenment. I was interested in finding out the sort of secrets of the Dharma life of Buddhism. I felt that Buddhism had something to teach me that I couldn't put my finger on. I wouldn't have been able to articulate it, but I felt that there was some wisdom here. I also had a sense that life was somehow, life as I had seen most people live it was not fulfilling enough. And the life that I was living, although it was fine, sort of seemed pretty mundane. It didn't sort of answer the deeper yearnings of the heart or my mind. But integration wasn't a word that I sort of used to understand all of these questions that I had. Actually, it's foundational, it's fundamental. It's fundamental. So, for example, when I came along and I started to meditate and I started to do the mindfulness of breathing and then the metta-bhavana practice, one of the things that happened was I just started to get more angry. And I thought, this doesn't seem what they say on the tin, does it? It's not. And it gradually dawned on me that actually I was angry, and all I was doing was discovering that I was angry, learning that I was angry. I just kind of thought I was a nice guy. Everybody loved me. If they knew me, they'd love me, as it were. And gradually, I thought, oh, you're not such a nice guy. You're pretty impatient. You get irritated. I didn't exactly fly off the handle, but I realised that there was more, uncomfortable emotions in me than I'd sort of believed. And I think that getting to know yourself is going to be essential. Getting to know ourselves is essential to any spiritual life, actually to any real human life. And partly that's what integration is getting at. Without that, I don't know if you've met people who are angry but don't know that they're angry. I don't know if I was like this. You can meet people who think they're really nice and sweet, and there's this kind of veneer of sugarcoating on their behaviour. But you meet them and you think, ooh, there's danger. Have you met people like that? You can't go very far with the Dharma life without, if you are papering over your life in that way. The cracks will sort of start to show. You can't go very far. So part of integration, and the part that I first want to talk about, is that we have to take responsibility, get to know ourselves, and then take responsibility for the people that we are. I think taking responsibility is synonymous with integration. It's synonymous with getting to know ourselves. So, for example, if I got to know when I got to know that, okay, I've got more anger in me than I sort of realised, it then sort of begs the question, what am I going to do with that? And I think I had to start taking responsibility for myself, for my emotions. And that's part of the challenge, I think, part of the challenge of integration. One of the effects of that, well, Buddhism is actually very uncompromising about taking responsibility for our minds, and for our lives generally, for our actions generally. One of the consequences of that is renouncing blame. And I kind of think this is unfashionable. I mean, I've been practicing Buddhism for the best part of 30 years, and I've seen our culture sort of change. And when I teach, I've seen sort of people's responses to Buddhism keep changing. And one of the things that I think our culture is moving towards is a culture of blame, more and more. A culture where you can say, oh yeah, this happened to me, and caused me all sorts of pain, trauma maybe, all sorts of things. And therefore I am the person that I am, and therefore I will react in the way that I do, without really taking responsibility for our actions or our reactions. We're quick to blame external circumstances or other people, aren't we? That is not going to lead to more integration. Life does, for all of us, present challenges, and I know for some people, life can be awful, and has been awful. I've been quite fortunate, and I can't really say that I've had a very terrible life or anything so far. So it's not that I'm sort of saying I can't understand blame and the temptation to blame. All I'm trying to say is that yes, difficult things can happen, and blame won't help. And actually blaming ourselves doesn't help either, does it? Because it's very easy to, this culture of blame can extend also to just thinking that I'm at fault. Some people tend to blame others and locate the problem outside of themselves. Other people will tend to fall into some sort of guilt and think that they're to blame for all their difficulties. Neither is helpful. Buddhism is a bit more subtle than that, nuanced than that, and sensible than that. Blame, self or other, is not very helpful. Yeah. It's interesting. Some of you were on. I was on the winter retreat. Some of you were there. And when we, this is the London Buddhist Centre's winter retreat that we've just had over Christmas and New Year. For a lot of people, it was their first retreat, and it's lovely to watch them arrive, really excited and open to explore. Just excited, really, a bit anxious probably. I mean, I was anxious when I first went on the retreat. And then it's really lovely to see them at the end of the retreat, really opened up and grateful and appreciative, and there's a heart-opening kind of sort of sense that the retreat can bring. And for a lot of people, it can be a very meaningful experience. But in the middle, there's always a struggle. There's always a struggle, not the same sort of struggle for everybody, but there is a kind of, as meditation starts to bite and the retreat starts to bite, there's more difficult things can arise for people. Resistance can arise. They arise for me on retreat, and I've done many, many retreats. The way that it arises for me is like, I just think, I don't want to be here. I don't want to get up in the morning. I don't want to meditate anymore. I want to blob out. I want to watch Netflix or turn my phone on and read the news or do anything apart from sit with myself and meditate. And I still have that after about 30 years of practice. Other people will struggle in different ways. Sometimes it's the food that's not good enough, or the teachings that are boring or not good enough, or the practices don't work, or Triratna's not good enough. All sorts of tendencies can arise And what we tend to do is project it all outwards. What we don't look at is, I'm in a bit of a bad mood, or I am feeling resistant, or I just want to lie in bed, or whatever it is. The tendency is to project it outwards. Buddhism's saying, actually, well, you can do that, but it won't get you anywhere. This is our mind. This is the mind that we've got right now, at this moment. What are we going to do about it? So part of integration is learning to take responsibility for our minds and not blaming. And then out of that responsibility, there's a choice that comes of, okay, then how am I going to act? How am I going to act in the world in terms of my speech, in terms of my behaviour towards other people? That's the choice that comes. So in a way, the key to integration is becoming a moral agent, a responsible moral agent. What I mean by that is recognising that I have responsibility for my mind and for the actions that stem from my mind, and then the consequences that stem from those actions. So if I lash out in anger and blame, probably somebody's going to get hurt, and probably they're going to, I don't know, if I habitually do that, they'll probably start avoiding me. I won't be a very pleasant person to be around, and that will have consequences for me and my life, and as well as for other people. If I'm perpetually grumpy, well, people won't really want to hang out with me. There you go. That's the consequences of my mind and my mind manifesting. So becoming a moral agent is so key. And it's not very sexy or glamorous work. So again, when I came to the London Buddhist Centre in 1994, I think, the first course that I went on, I was expecting to be initiated into the secrets of Tantric Buddhism. And I was, I'd paid my money, I thought that's what I'd get. What I got was a course in ethics. 6 weeks. We went through all the precepts, and I learned about trying to be more friendly, trying to be more kind, trying to be more generous, trying to be more content, trying to be more mindful. I liked the people that were teaching it, but I thought, goodness, there's got to be more than this. All these years later, I think, I could do with just focusing on trying to be more friendly, trying to be more generous, trying to be more content, trying to be more truthful, trying to be more mindful. There's it's endless, this path of taking responsibility for oneself and for one's behaviour. Why is it so important? Because, well, it's important because of the law of karma. So let's just open this up. Would anybody like to say what the law of karma teaches? What is the law of karma in Buddhism?
Actions have consequences.
Yeah, who said that, sorry? Hello, I can't see you down there. Hello, what's your name?
Joe.
Joe. Actions have consequences. What sort of actions and what sort of consequences? Can you say any more?
Well, like you said earlier, if you're not very pleasant to people, they'll stop wanting to be around you.
Yeah.
For
So
instance.
yes, that's so. Particularly sort of habitual actions will have maybe quite wide-ranging consequences. I mean, more specifically, what karma, the law of karma, teaches is that the state of mind behind the action governs whether the consequences are likely to be beneficial or harmful. So Buddhism puts a lot of emphasis on the state of mind, on our minds, rather than coming up with a rule book of act in this way, don't act in this way. I don't know, don't talk with your mouth full, or don't have lions apart from on a Sunday, or on a Sunday make sure you meditate extra. Or there are no those sorts of rules are. Well, Buddhism doesn't really have them. What Buddhism says is, look at your state of mind, and if your state of mind is self-centered, self sort of achieving, you're grasping. If it's selfish in any kind of way, if it's hateful, if there's aversion or anger or pushing away of other people, if you're in a mood that is generally feeling sorry for yourself or blaming others, if you're acting from that sort of state of mind, or one of those states of mind, then probably the consequences are not going to be beneficial for you and other people. They're likely to be consequences that bring you more suffering, and suffering for others. Conversely, if you can act from metta, from love, from generosity, from awareness of other people, the consequences are going to be beneficial for you and for others. Now, you can sort of think that just makes common sense. And in a certain sense, Buddhism is just common sense. It is enlightened common sense. Sangharakshita, the founder of Triratna, says that in a way Buddhism doesn't have anything sort of new to teach you. It's enlightened common sense. I'll say a little bit more. I think it goes beyond how we normally think of common sense. But at a certain level, it's just teaching you how to be a healthy, happy human being. I think that kids in school should learn this, the law of karma. I mean, of course you couldn't call it that, but I think we don't teach people how to be happy, how to be genuinely happy from within. We assume so often that we will be happy if we get the bathroom, or whatever it is. Forgive me, Kanye. We'll assume that happiness will come from without. What we don't teach is that real fulfillment in life will come from your state of mind, working on your state of mind, your state of heart. And out of that, everything flows, like your relationships with others will be dependent on your state of mind. That's how the world works, and we should be teaching people that. So when Buddhism talks about ethics, it's not in a moralistic sense. It's not in a sort of judgmental sense that is saying be good or you're bad, or you're bad if you sleep with the wrong people or have too much sex, or it's not fussed about that sort of trivial behaviour that we get so hooked on when we think about ethics. What Buddhism's concerned about is the fundamental root of the expression of the action, which is the mind. And it's saying, look, you can transform your mind. And integration, the law of karma, can help you transform your mind. If you start to try out the law of karma in your life, well, let's just see, has it worked for you? Those of you who've been meditating for a while, or practicing Buddhism for a while, or trying to practice Buddhism for a while, have you become more fulfilled or happy or positive in some way? Yeah. So that's the law of karma. Yeah. And I think it's the first thing that we kind of need to be teaching people. Everybody should be aware of this. So initially, integration is about ethical and psychological concerns. And then it goes beyond that. One of the things I've been thinking is that our culture seems to encourage development in a very uneven way. So, how should I put this? I think we live in a very heady time. A very, very heady, rather alienated time. I mean, what I mean by heady is it's as if, I mean, partly it's the sort of information the deluge of information that we're all subject to. There's so much content coming our way through our phones and our social media and our technology generally. I meet a lot of people, and I can fall into this trap of, as it were, existing from the neck up in my head. And what it means is that we're alienated from the body, we're alienated from our feelings, our emotions. I mean, I'm talking generally, so forgive me, this may not apply to you. But as a culture, I think we're alienated from our bodies, our feelings, our emotions, from nature, from in London. Brixton might be a bit different to East London. I think it is a bit different. But often we're alienated from each other. Millions of people living in a small, confined kind of city, alienated from each other, lonely and isolated, individualistically sort of atomized. That's part of our development, and yet we're intellectually very sophisticated, or we like to think that. We've got lots of ideas, everybody's got opinions about everything, but in a really rather unevenly developed way. Does that make sense? So integration is about becoming broader and bigger and more even in our development. Genuine intelligence wouldn't just be heady. Buddhism, for example, doesn't divorce reason from emotion. In Buddhism, like the word for mind, one of the words for mind, is chitta, which also is the word for heart. So, for example, Buddhism says, look, our views about life tend to come from our emotional state. It's not that you can just say you're feeling generally depressed in your emotional state. That is going to colour your view about life. Do you know what I mean? Life will be drained actually of colour. I've never been clinically depressed, but I believe that that's probably what happens. It's drained of meaning. No interaction feels worthwhile, and no action feels worthwhile. All meaning's gone. That's coming from an emotional place. Now, that's an extreme, but take a less extreme case of I am feeling, just a bit irritable. That's going to colour my interactions and my view of the world that day. So part of integration is this, learning to work on our hearts as well as our minds, learning to become aware of our bodies in that sensate way that I was trying to talk about earlier. So for example, when we think of our bodies, our culture tends to be very narcissistic and says that you think about your body as an object that you want to make more beautiful, more sexy, more appealing. That's the way that we think of our bodies, as if it's a sort of utilitarian way of thinking of our bodies, so that we can be more sexy, so that we can get what we want, the perfect partner, by having the perfect body. Does that make sense? What we don't, you can have that narcissistic sense of the body and still not actually be very aware of what your body feels like. Be quite closed to actual sensations in the body. Whereas real awareness, mindfulness, begins with becoming aware of the actual experience of being embodied, rather than just existing from the neck up. And that experience of being embodied also includes, how do our emotions manifest in the body? How does our emotional world feel in the body? That's necessary for us to become more integrated. And it doesn't mean that we have to be nice all the time. The reason I was pointing out that those difficult emotions need to be felt and experienced is that Buddhism isn't about tidying us up and making us just shiny, nice people. The order that I'm part of in Sri Ratna isn't very nice, actually. I mean, present company excluded. We're all lovely. But goodness, at times it's hard work being in the Triratna Buddhist order. People are genuine, they're honest, they're not nice in that English polite way. They're genuinely lovely people in that there's a lot of love and care and genuine concern for each other, friendship even, real friendship, but it's not always nice. Does that make sense? And Sangharakshita wasn't a nice man in that sense of a cuddly Buddhist. He was an individual. He was one of the most integrated men I've ever met. He knew himself very, very, very deeply, I think, and he was. He had a huge mind that was very integrated with his emotion, his will. Well, I can't do this, but one of the telling things about not being so integrated like myself is I can feel sometimes split, like on retreat. I want to go on retreat, and then I don't want to be there. Do you know what I mean? Or I want to get on with my email backlog, and then I watched some YouTube videos instead, knowing that actually I've got a deadline looming. I wanted to think about this talk this afternoon, and I didn't. Sangharakshita, my teacher, Bante, he would be able to say things to himself in his practice. He'd say things like, I'll think about this matter at 3 p.m. next Tuesday. And then do it, and put it out of mind till 3 p.m. Tuesday. Do you see what I mean? That's quite a different way of living. So I think there's something about bringing head and heart and will together. Otherwise, we just exist as heady, opinionated people who tend to think in a disembodied way, divorced from how we really feel, and tend to blame the world around us for when life doesn't work or when we don't quite get what we want. So I think what our culture generally, Triratna is trying to do is teach us things like an appreciation of beauty, for example. That should be part of an integrated life. And a capacity to feel grateful for what's positive in our life and to the people who have given us things. A sense of reverence for what goes beyond our ken. A sense of wonder even for what it is to be alive. That surely is part of being integrated. It's not just about being able to have opinions and be clever at parties. I used to pretend I was a Buddhist when I was in my teens. I knew nothing about Buddhism, but I would at parties say that I was a Buddhist, just to try and be more interesting. So surely that can't be this rather superficial, shallow. I was a teenager, so it's forgivable. But you've got to grow out of. We have to grow out of that sort of veneer, this persona that we put on ourselves to be a certain way, so that other people will like us or respond in a certain way. Do you see what I mean? So many of our, so much of the time, we're sort of told to put on masks and personas. That's not integration. That will lead to a split in our psyche. So part of this work is to do with mindfulness and meditation. Part of it, I think, is to do with friendship and who you hang out with and the world that you move in. How do you spend your time and your energy? So I used to work in the corporate world for about 10 years after I left university. And I worked with some very bright, intelligent people, but the culture was one of blame. The culture was one of backstabbing and shifting responsibility onto other people, so that you were never wrong. It was one of, I mean, not entirely. There, some very, very good people there and friends as well, but it was a culture of putting on a show. Do you know what I mean? A front. And I knew instinctively, in a way, when I started working there, that if I remained there for my life, or if I remained in that sort of corporate world, I would forget who I was, because I would become that front, I would become that suit, that persona. And I think we're encouraged to do that, and it leads to a great deal of unhappiness. So who do you hang out with? Because who you spend time with, the sort of environment that you put yourself in, who you're friends with, will either help or hinder your path to becoming more genuine, more real, more integrated, more alive, I think. But integration doesn't just have... So everything I've been talking about so far, Bhante Sangharakshita talks about it as horizontal integration. But there's also what he calls vertical integration. So does anybody want to have a go at saying what he means by vertical integration? What might he mean? By horizontal integration, he's talking about gathering up and getting to know ourselves and becoming more psychologically a unified person at a certain level. So what would vertical integration mean?
Go deeper.
Yeah, go on. Say more about what you mean by that.
Well, I suppose so. If this is your persona, then that would be your spiritual development somehow.
Yeah. So go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
I think consciousness has depth to it, and this is now, I'm talking metaphorically. I don't know what consciousness is, and I don't know what I mean by it has depth. It's a metaphor. What I think I mean is that there are sort of levels of consciousness, and we tend to, in ordinary waking life, just occupy one narrow band of consciousness, and we think that that is all there is to us, that there is all there is to the mind. When you start to meditate, perhaps it's not even meditation that's needed, but meditation certainly helps this. You start to experience different levels of consciousness, almost different dimensions of consciousness. Have you had any of that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Some nods, some shakes of the head. So some nods. What sort of experiences would you say signify a different level of consciousness?
You start feeling more connected with others, I think.
Okay, so you start feeling more connected with others, and I think also with the natural world around you.
With everything.
With everything. You start to experience... again, we're using metaphors, because it's a sense of connection. That's one way that we can talk about it. Yeah. Anything else?
More peaceful?
Yeah, more peaceful. More peaceful. And I think that it's a sort of... You can start to experience a sort of peace, even a sort of stillness, in meditation particularly, which doesn't seem to be dependent on what's happening. I don't know if that's happened to you yet, but you could be having all sorts of turbulent times in your life and still experience a level of serenity and peacefulness and equanimity, particularly in meditation. So external circumstances don't seem to touch that. That's possible. So it's like we're not blown around by what's happening in our life. There's a deeper serenity, a deeper peacefulness. So that's what I mean by depth. Somebody else?
Beauty?
Yeah, beauty. A greater sense of beauty arises. That's right. So I think that a lot of people are already in touch with this, but meditation, practicing the Dharma, helps you cultivate this aesthetic appreciation, this sense of beauty. It doesn't have to be limited to those people that call themselves artists or think of themselves as creative types. This appreciation of beauty you can work on, and it will arise if you work on it. And it is a state of mind. I can sort of sometimes be walking down Bethnal Green Road, and it's, you know, Bethnal Green isn't beautiful by any, you couldn't technically, I guess if you were a black and white photographer, and, you know, you could probably make anything look arty, but it's, trust me, it's not beautiful most of the time. But if I'm in the right mood and the right state of mind, you can start to see beauty anywhere. So again, it's not that beauty has to just be, as it were, out there. It is something to do with a state of mind. Yeah. One more, maybe?
Maybe like an expansiveness, something kind of connecting to kind of beyond our mundane experience, maybe stars, universe, that way.
Yeah, so expansiveness that connects us to more than our mundane experience. So this, I think, starts to touch on what you've just said, starts to touch on what Buddhism's, where it might be going, where it might be sort of aiming. What it's saying is that, look, actually, there's no boundaries to consciousness. Consciousness, you know, we tend to sometimes think that it arises in the brain. The brain lives in the skull. The skull is part of this body, and that's the boundary, that's me. But actually, consciousness, the experience isn't like that, and I believe that actually consciousness isn't limited. It's not arisen through the brain, it might be mediated through the brain. When you meditate, hopefully you don't experience that you're trapped within your skull. You probably have a greater sense of spaciousness. If your heart is open, or if you're connected with beauty, you have a greater sense of spaciousness. If you feel connected to other people, there's a greater sense of spaciousness. If you look up at the stars and the sky, you know, if you take in vast vistas, that can affect the sense of spaciousness inside you. You can feel bigger, literally. Now that inner spaciousness isn't happening in this sort of three-dimensional external space. It's a spaciousness that is the space of consciousness. So in a way, space is a bit of a metaphor again for it. And what Buddhism says is that what keeps us narrow, what keeps us small, is that most of the time we don't live in this state of connection, of beauty, of wonder. Most of the time what happens is that quite quickly we sort of, consciousness comes back to me. It's like a rubber band. I stretch the rubber band. I mean, I went to see the Cézanne show at the Tate Modern. I've been about 5 times so far. I really like, I mean, like is too silly a word. Cézanne is a master of I mean, he's just a master artist. But also what he does in his paintings, if you really look at his paintings and take the trouble to look, not just take a selfie and move on, if you really take the trouble to gaze at the work, he teaches you how to look. It's like he's looking with a particular eye, and looking at his work, you can start to glimpse how he sees the world. So when he sees an apple, it's not just a piece of fruit. It seems to stand for all beauty and all life itself. And I'm not just being hubristic there. I think there's something of... this is aside. A few years ago with my trip, and I went on a sort of Cézanne pilgrimage. We went to Aix-en-Provence and we visited his studio. And in his studio, has everybody seen a Cézanne painting? I mean, at least in you know what I'm talking about. In his studio, which is sort of preserved as he left it, you've got all these objects that he painted in his still lives, like a wine bottle and a ginger jar and so forth, and fruit and so forth. They replaced the fruit, you know, and jugs and whatever. And you look at these objects and you think they could have just come from a bric-a-brac shop around the corner. They are nothing. You would not glance twice at a ginger jar or a jug that he painted, or a piece of cloth, or whatever it is. And then they had just, you know, a big screen with his still lives being shown on a sort of slideshow. And he had transformed the objects in his paintings. They no longer were just ordinary pieces of fruit, or an ordinary jar, or an ordinary wine bottle, or an ordinary fruit dish. He had turned them into objects that seem to be transcendent. I can't tell you how he does it and why it has this effect, but it's so striking. It's so striking. So go to the Cézanne exhibition and really look, just choose 2 paintings or 3 and really stand in front of them for 20 minutes or so. The reason though I'm saying this is that I was there just a few days ago, intending to do just this, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I stood in front of 2 masterpieces of still life, and I just kept pinging back to myself like the elastic band. I knew it was beautiful. I knew this was valuable. I knew this was great. And all I could think about was me. Yeah? My lunch or coffee or what I was going to do when I got home, or whatever it was. My mind was still small. It refused to stay expanded. Other times, I've been completely entranced and walked out the gallery, and everything looks amazing and beautiful. Yeah? So the reason that we're not able to stay in this expansive state is that we keep pinging back to me and my self-centered concerns. What Buddhism's teaching us is it's saying, look, there's a possibility of transcending that completely transcending that. That would be what integration looks like at its fullness. That's what enlightenment would look like. That we would wake up from our slumber of narrow self-referential consciousness that's all about me and me and me. And what, even when we think about other people in that state, it's like, what do they think about me? Yeah? It's very, very self-referential. So our self-referencing keeps us small. And I guess what Buddhism is saying is that self-referencing, the tragedy of it is that it's based on a delusion. It's based on a wrong notion that I am separate from the world, and that I'm a fixed creature in here somewhere, or in here somewhere, separate from the rest of life. That is a completely wrong notion. It's very intuitive, but it's wrong. And so integration at its height, at its fullness, is seeing through that. So it's not just about, it starts with psychological and ethical work, becoming more whole. It includes this horizontal integration of becoming one individual being that thinks as they feel and feels as they think and acts as they think and want to, and is in control of their behaviour in the sense, not in a mechanical sense, but in a sense of being able to be responsible for their behaviour, and affect the world positively. So that's all true. But then what you do with that healthy, happy human self is to go deeper or to go higher, to start expanding into these heights of consciousness. So Buddhism talks about dhyanic states. Have you heard of dhyana? Dhyana is a word for superconscious states of mind. If you start to have a regular meditation practice, chances are you will start to experience states of mind that feel perhaps a bit more mystical. I was pointing to looking for pleasure in the meditation. These states can arise out of looking for pleasure. They can be blissful without any external sense experience. They can be extremely pleasurable. They can be extremely peaceful. They can take you to places which are like the pinnacle of what human beings this side of enlightenment can experience. You can have more. I mean, if you even start to glimpse it, it will convince you that ordinarily we're just occupying this very narrow band of consciousness and consciousness. I mean, most people, I don't know, I've never really done recreational drugs, but that's probably what most people get from recreational drugs, these ecstatic, expansive states of mind. Well, you don't need the recreational drugs. You can access those in a more healthy, reliable way through meditation. And what's more, they will start to permeate your mind in a way that if you just do it through drugs, you just get come down. But through meditation, you start to become a bigger person with access to these different levels of consciousness. They start to become mystical states almost. So this is what vertical integration means. And the ideal would be that we would dwell in those states all the time. I don't dwell in that expansive, connected, blissful, free, serene, equanimous state all the time. I touch it, perhaps. A Buddha would be completely in those sorts of states all the time. An enlightened being would be in those states all the time. And enlightenment is said to be our potential, and I do believe that it is our potential, it's our birthright. That's what this path is leading to. And even that doesn't sound enough, actually. I talk about it and I think, yes, it's attractive, but so what in a certain sense? Well, the reason I think it's important is why. Why is it important? Because I think that we're not here as human beings to just get on with life in the normal sense of doing the shopping, cooking our meals, paying the mortgage if you can afford to have a property, buying the car, having the bathroom. That isn't what human life is meant to be. It really is not what it's meant to be. And if we live at that level and live at that level alone, it's like we'll have wasted our lives. I do believe that. Even if you manage to be successful at it and famous and whatever, we'll have wasted our lives. At its worst, human behaviour goes much more wrong than that. And you look at all the suffering that human beings cause each other in the world, and that is because of their states of mind. Yeah? Human beings don't cause wars out of nowhere. They come from people's states of mind. They come from these narrow, self-referential, trapped, confined states of mind to do with hatred and so forth, greed. So as a species even, I think it's really important that we live in a world with problems that seem insurmountable, huge, all around us. And there's so much blame, as I was saying earlier on. I don't think that we're going to solve anything unless we also raise our level of consciousness as a species, as human beings. I know that that won't be enough, that you need socio-political solutions and so forth, organisational work, etc. I know that it's not enough. It's just that I completely think that consciousness is at the heart of our behaviour, at the roots of our behaviour, I mean, and we do need to transform our minds if we're going to carry on in this world. That feels to me self-evident. From a dharmic perspective, it's also said, and I believe this, that death isn't the end of consciousness. Death is not the end of consciousness. And that we will keep coming back and doing our lives again and again, not our lives, but we'll take on another form and live another life. And from an enlightened mind's perspective, until we really see how to live, until we experience the potential of consciousness, all we'll be doing is going round and round a sort of hamster wheel of life and death and life and death and life and death, trying to be fulfilled and never quite making our lives fulfilled. So for me, this feels like, working on my mind feels like the most important thing that I could do. And then even that's not enough, because even that can become self-referential. Me and my mind, me and my consciousness. So part of what Buddhism is teaching us is that we have to, right from the beginning, be doing it for others. If we work on our minds, we will be able to make a better contribution in the world, however we do that. We do it so that we can be a positive influence in the world, in whatever sphere of influence that we have around us. And collectively, as a community, we can do more than we can do as individuals. So we do it in order to be a force for good in the world. This world needs people who are coming from a less selfish, less self-referential, more loving, more connected place. And that's why we do it. And that's what integration really is about. It's about waking up to our potential so that we can be a force for good, a force for love, a force for compassion, a force for awareness, a force for wisdom. And that seems to be more urgent than ever. Anything else that you do with your life, whatever you do with your life, and I know we have to do other things like earn a living and so forth, everything else surely is secondary to this. I'm going to finish by reading you something that Karen Armstrong wrote. She wrote this book. Some of you have heard me probably talk about it before. It's called The Case for God: What Religion Really Means. That's the subtitle. And she is talking about the three great theistic traditions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Mostly, that's what this book is about. And she's very eloquently and intelligently countering the sort of militant atheists that you get, like Richard Dawkins and so forth. She sort of, I don't know, she makes Richard Dawkins look like he's writing a children's book or something. She's really intelligent and sophisticated in her argument for religion. But I'm not a theist. Buddhism isn't a theistic tradition. It doesn't believe in a God that is external to creation, to us in that sense. It does believe, however, that there is something more than our ordinary consciousness, and that is somehow connected with the way things really are, with the way reality is. That enlightenment isn't just something that happened to the Buddha 2,500 years ago. It's somehow a potential in the universe that can affect our lives right now. So it does believe in a transcendental realm and in a transcendental reality beyond me, beyond you. But interestingly, Karen Armstrong starts the book and finishes the book with Buddhism, even though the book isn't about Buddhism. I find that really, the epilogue her last paragraph is talking about the Buddha. And that's what I want to leave you with. I find that really interesting because I think that I think she goes very eloquently to the heart of the matter. Buddha literally means, it's a title and it means awake. Awake. And the assumption is that us unenlightened ones, I'm not enlightened, and if you are, tell me later, us unenlightened ones are asleep. We're living not just in a narrow band of consciousness, we might as well just be asleep. We're like wandering around, sleepwalking through life and causing each other and ourselves pain through not waking up. So I'll leave you with what Karen Armstrong says about, she doesn't mention the word integration, but she could have been doing that. One day, a Brahmin priest came across the Buddha sitting in contemplation under a tree and was astonished by his serenity, stillness, and self-discipline. The impression of immense strength channeled creatively into an extraordinary peace reminded him of a great tusker elephant. "Are you a god, sir?" the priest asked. "Are you an angel or a spirit?" "No," the Buddha replied. He explained that he had simply revealed a new potential in human nature. It was possible to live in this world of conflict and pain, at peace and in harmony with one's fellow creatures. There was no point in merely believing it. You would only discover its truth if you practiced his method, systematically cutting off egotism at the root. You would then live at the peak of your capacity, activate parts of the psyche that normally lie dormant, and become fully enlightened human beings. "Remember me," the Buddha told the curious priest, "as one who is awake." Thank you.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist Community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a class, a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving and you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.